Hello, friends. Welcome back to Film Chewing. I am here today to discuss 28 Years Later. It just released on Thursday, and it's a franchise I'm a pretty big fan of. I think I saw the original in theater, and I was really excited to see 28 Years Later, so I had to brave the theater. And it is time to normalize seeing a movie by yourself. I think that is one of my favorite things to do over the years. So 28 Years Later is the sequel to 28 Days Later and 28 Weeks Later, with Danny Boyle back directing and Alex Garland helping write. And by the way, I will be spoiler free, and then I will give some spoilery thoughts at the end. Then I will give everyone a heads up before I get into spoilers. I don't like to spoil anything, especially with a movie this new. So if you want to avoid spoilers, don't worry. I won't spoil anything until the end, and I will give a fair warning and add that into the show notes. 28 years later, obviously we pick up 28 years after the initial outbreak. We are in Scotland, and we are following a group of survivors that have found an island off the shore that is only accessible from a walkway that is only walkable during low tide. There's only certain times that you can access the island, and I think they've been there long enough to where they are pretty safe. They have a colony set up, have a little society, groups of people, they have families, and the younger children there that have been born have never even seen an infected or really know much about them. Now, the infected, what I think this movie, one of the things it does a really good job with is explaining or showing us how the infected have evolved and how humanity has evolved. The infected have changed. There are different types of infected now, and I know that in the first film, it's hinted that some of them have starved or are starving after a certain amount of time, and it seems as though the stronger infected have evolved and they've been able to reproduce, and they have a whole new different set of skills now. Some of them do. So we follow a family, and the whole goal, I won't get into too much of what happens because I don't want to spoil it, but there's a family there, a man and a wife, and they have a young son named Spike, who is played by Alfie, because I forget his last name. He does a really good job in the role. I think everyone does a pretty good job in their roles in this one. I think the acting is pretty good. Even though, sadly, the characters are probably one of my least favorite parts of the movie. The character motivations really only serve to move the story forward, and a lot of them don't make sense. A lot of the things they do don't make sense. The motivations, there's one specifically that seems very dangerous that moves the story forward, and it's set up fairly early on what this will be. But there were some great, with Danny Boyle back directing, there's some great shots, some great cinematography, some really, kind of the grainy feel that 28 Days Later had throughout. Is some of the shots really could really bring you back to that. And I think it's really effective for this kind of movie where we have some really odd angle shots where the horizon is almost always at an angle, and there's some really there's some close-ups of some of the characters. There's some flashbacks of what happened in the past. So some of the survivors, we get an idea of where they've come from and what their initial experience was with the outbreak, and all those things top notch. I think all of that is great. It's great to come back to this world with Danny Boyle directing and that feel again. It definitely scratches that nostalgic itch. The second film has a different feel to it. It has more of a polished look. It doesn't have as much of the kind of grain and kind of the messy look that the first film did. And what we do bring from the second film is there's some wide open fields and some really open spaces that the infected chase these survivors. And from the second film, I thought that was really, really effective. Some of my favorite scenes from that second movie were, those wide open fields of them being chased, where you were running for your life and hoping that your cardio is up to snuff, because if you run out of if you run out of gas or you don't find a way, then you're dead. And we all know what happens when you are captured by the infected. So the in that sense, it took some elements from the second film, and I think it gave us more of a wide open feel. And the first film is more close up, that's more kind of confined and claustrophobic. A lot of the film is because we're in the city. But here we are out in open fields, and in a way, it's almost scarier because you can see them coming, and there's really no place to hide because there is open fields. But yeah, the cinematography was fantastic, and the actor's name is Alfie Williams, who plays Spike. By the way, just for everyone's reference. But yeah, there's also lots of flashbacks, and when I say flashbacks, I don't mean only for the characters. There's also flashbacks or kind of sneak looks at some of the infected, and it is. I think it may have been experiences from survivors that they're remembering past experiences with their interactions, but I think some of them are almost like being a fly on the wall and seeing what the infected do when they're not chasing people. But the another thing that I thought was really interesting, what you see in the trailer, and I think the first trailer that was released was kind of these songs and chants and poems from wartime in the UK, and I think it does a great job of drawing a parallel between past historical events, humanity, their history of violence, of death, of battles, of conflicts, and kind of drawing it to where we've almost gone back in time, and we're battling a different foe, and we're fighting a different battle, different type of battle, and just kind of how this history just repeats itself. And inevitably in a lot of zombie movies, we always get we get the if a zombie if a zombie franchise goes on long enough, we almost get the zombies are just like us kind of thing, where we the zombies, we're not that different. And we do get some of that, but it wasn't enough to be annoying. So there are some comparisons there, but I think a lot of it was demonstrating how much the infected have evolved. So it's not, I don't think it wasn't enough to where, it was annoying in that sense, but it does demonstrate, like, they are evolving, they are changing over the years. So yeah, but the battles, all the flashbacks and the historical, all that stuff, even just the way that, you know, we handle these situations, how people are able to survive. We have to kind of, draw these, get into groups and encourage each other and work together to survive, and almost be boastful about our ability to survive and how formidable we are, and how, to encourage other people to kind of remain hopeful and not be, full of despair, and think that when it's hopeless. It's all very, very interesting. And then the third act happened. And I'm not going to say here just yet what happened, but there is so in the very beginning of the film, there's a quick mention of another group that exists in the world, and it's very quick. And in the last few minutes, we get an answer. We get kind of we find out what that group is, but also just the third act in general. There's a really, really big tonal shift. It felt like a different movie. It felt like a little jarring. It's a plot thread. It's a subplot that was set up throughout the movie. So it's not out of nowhere. There's a plot thread that's set up in the beginning that kind of takes over, and it becomes about just that for a while. And it just felt very, very different. The whole mood changed. And in the last few minutes, there's something that happens that it's just so out of left field, that what happens. And of course, I'm not going to spoil it for anyone, but there is something that happens that I honestly thought this was a joke, that someone's messing around with the projector. This has to be some kind of mistake. What is going on? There was even some chuckles in the theater. Everyone was kind of looking around like, what? What's going on? So it's a big change. The first half, I really, even the first 2 thirds, I really liked what they were doing with the world, how they expanded on it, how it, demonstrated how it evolved, how humanity is evolving, what the rest of the world is up to. And by the way, if you've seen the second film, some of what's happening in the rest of the world doesn't line up with what happened in the second film. So I'm not sure if that was just scrapped or if they changed their mind or they're retconning the second movie, because they did mention in the opening scene, they do kind of give a recap, and they do recap the second movie in a sense that the US military came in, set up some zones and, some safe zones and quarantine areas. But yeah, it's a little weird, but we do get an idea of what the rest of the world is up to. And so we do get a lot of the world really grows in this movie, and I believe there's two more planned, and I've heard that the next movie is due out in December or January, so it's not that much longer. I'm curious to see where it goes. I hope this the kind of the swing they take at the end of this movie pays off. I have faith in Garland and in Boyle, so I'm hoping it works out. But I don't know. I'm not sure how they're gonna what's happening or what's going on here, because it's very, very different. But maybe that's what we need to do. We need to not have the same movie over and over again, as much as it's fun to see people be chased by infected. And so, but yeah, there's some great jump scares. It does a really good job of ramping up the tension, of making you feel like, you know, the infected or even more dangerous in some ways. The dread, all those things that make a zombie movie great. This movie has it, especially in the first half. The second half is a whole nother thing. but but overall, I enjoyed it. If you were a fan of the franchise, I think you'll enjoy it. If you haven't seen the first two movies, you don't really have to see this one, or don't really have to see them to see this one. It gives you a recap, and you kind of get an idea of what's happening in the world. But yeah, overall, it was fun. I'm curious and really, really eager to see where they go with this, because I have no idea what's going on. So overall, it was a good time. It was worth it. I do recommend it if you are interested in seeing it. If you want to see it, I think you'll probably enjoy it. But yeah, just be prepared. There's some weird takes. There's some weird changes. So here at the 13-minute mark, I'm going to start getting into some spoilers, and we will talk spoiler things. So if you do not want to be spoiled, thank you for listening, and we will talk to you next time. If you don't care about being spoiled, if you've already seen it, then stick around. So I mentioned the character motivations, taking Spike out for his kind of to get a kill. It's so he's taken out earlier than most kids. He's younger than most kids, and he goes out to get his first kill. Okay, they end up, they don't seem very, the dad has been in a lot of situations, so he's very calm. He's very patient. He's been through it. This isn't really a big deal for him. Even he makes some pretty. He seems very casual at times, and just kind of doesn't seem as careful as you would imagine someone taking their kid out on their first kill would be. They waste all their arrows. They end up getting in that really bad situation in the house, where the house collapses because of all the animals in the herd. The vibration brings the house they're in down. All of it seemed very careless and kind of pointless. I thought they would go out for some supplies for a purpose, but they just go out just to get a kill. And to risk your life and your son's life just to get a kill and go so far in seemed a little strange. And then at the end, where they're being chased, they're singing and they're walking on the causeway when the tide is rising. And that was fun and all, but the very last minute, where he is basically like, shot an arrow shot through him, where he's the alpha falls down, and I mean, they don't ever make a mention of him again, the alpha, where everyone's aware that these alphas exist. They narrowly survive, and they kill the alpha, but I'm assuming his body is taken by the tide. Otherwise, he's like right at their doorstep. I don't know if it's kind of yeah, I don't know. So that was a little weird, but I do like the idea of the alpha that they've evolved, they've become stronger, they've become more formidable. They have kind of a leader. I think that is kind of the natural evolution. I think that would probably happen. The crawlers aren't all that interesting. How are they that fat? Living off of worms and, kind of grubs and foraging. I don't know. They crawl and that kind of gives you a slow zombie feel to them. But how are they so fat? How are they so fat? I don't know. Maybe they're eating high fat worms or they're on a maybe worms are fattier than we know. And I mean, if they crawl everywhere, you'd think they'd be in better shape, but I don't know. I mean, they're cool and all, but why are you so fat? Come on. I don't know. You would think they get enough exercise to not be that big if that's all they're eating. But maybe there's a different explanation for that. I think it's probably just to add to the kind of give it more of a slower, kind of more, make them different, I guess, smaller or, kind of slower and fatter. And yeah. So the infected, I like how they've evolved. I liked the wartime flashbacks we get, and the ring that we see at the beginning of the film with the upside down cross. And I think they mentioned something like something about the French are upset or somebody's upset. And so that is the group I'm guessing at the end because the man who finds Spike has the upside down cross. So I'm guessing that's the group that they mentioned. I don't know what their deal is. Why are they dressed like they're going to like a Bee Gees concert? All of it was really weird. The bright colors and I don't know I don't know what's going on there. It's very very maybe they're just eccentric, but really really big change in feel and tone, and it really threw me at the end. The last few minutes, I thought it was a joke. Now the mother with her cancer, with Spike seeing his dad with another woman, he gets mad and he decides to leave to take his mom, who is bedridden, take his mom in across the causeway and across the kind of the plains and the danger where the infected are. For them to travel that far and not only really run into one group and they're saved by the soldier, that all seemed very initially. When when Spike and his dad go out, they encounter infected pretty quickly. Within minutes, they're finding somebody. But when Spike and his mom go out, and his mom, who is barely coherent at most of the time, when they travel, they don't see anyone for a long time, and that seemed a little, I don't know. And someone who's that inexperienced to go all that way, when the crawler does crawl in and almost kills Spike, and the mom comes and bashes the infected skull against the rock. Okay, I, I mean, I don't know. Some of those motivations just seem kind of strange. But to take your son out for his first kill, Spike to take his mom, knowing how dangerous it is, take her all the way to the doctor. This doctor who he has no idea what kind of doctor he is, all the way across the island. And I get that he's desperate to save his mom, and he wants to help his mom, but the odds of them being killed were pretty high. And the soldier who is and the group of soldiers who are killed, and then the soldier who finds them. I thought that was a nice break. There's some funny moments in those conversations. Especially the thing about, well, what's wrong with her lips. Mike. I know someone who's allergic to shellfish, and her lips swell up like that too. I thought that was funny. That was some great dialogue. It was nice to break up the kind of the tension, but I think it was needed. But again, they're sitting in an open field where they can be seen from far away. So some of it kind of established a certain amount of danger and then kind of forget about it. Not a huge complaint, but and then the soldier, of course, is killed. So the whole scene with the pregnant infected woman, she gives birth on the train, and the mom goes and holds her hand. So that was the part where I felt like, okay, the infected still have parts of humanity left, and which is weird because the rage virus in the past two movies there's been no there's little of that. There's very little humanity left in the infected. But I guess over time, maybe they are becoming a little bit more human or not as full of rage. And then the baby comes out uninfected, and they take the baby, and the baby never cries. This baby is like the best baby ever. The baby doesn't cry much at all, survives this whole thing without milk, with only water. And I don't get what the point of the baby is. Maybe that's to demonstrate the fact that the infected have evolved and again, they're just like us. Maybe, I don't know. That was kind of weird. And then the alpha comes, rips off the soldier's head. Um, he's shot with a dart, and the alpha comes back, tries to get the doctor and Spike. They're able to get him again with a dart. Why don't they just kill him? Why don't they kill him? I don't. That's what I didn't get. When the doctor mentions he's been on the island, he's been in the area for a few years. He is sedated. He's just standing there, helpless. Slit his throat or do something to this guy because he's obviously dangerous. He's out to kill you. Why wouldn't you kill it? I don't understand that at all. I didn't get that. I mean, yeah, that whole thing I didn't that really really frustrating in movies where the villain is laying down or is kind of really vulnerable, and the survivors or the people being chased don't take advantage of the situation and kill the thing that's trying to kill them. I didn't get that at all. Not at all. but but maybe the doctor has a soft spot for the infected. I don't know. And how has he survives by using iodine because the infected don't like iodine. So he has iodine all over him. And he seems very carefree. He's just sitting on the side of the little across from this little stream or river. He's not worried about infected coming to get him. I don't know. That whole thing was weird. But I did like as strange as the mom's death was, and getting her skull and putting it on the top of the heap. All that was very, very, very. It was a big shift in tone and feel for the movie. I do get the whole, death is inevitable, death and rebirth. Kind of being hopeful. Kind of appreciating. Spike appreciates his mom and lets her go. And the baby is another thing where the baby is brought back, and that's in a way the death and rebirth, because the baby is kind of a sign of that kind of hopeful feel for it, to where the baby's being born, the baby survived, even though the mom didn't. All of that I thought was okay. It just didn't really feel like it fit in this movie, at least not the way that it happens. So the film leaves off with Spike going on his own. The dad's not happy, and the dad doesn't go look for the mom and for his son. Someone who is, maybe he wasn't able to get out of the island to go to the mainland to find them because of the tide. But yeah, I'm not sure. I thought he would be one of the main characters, but really Spike is the main character, and he is wanting to go after his kids. So I'm guessing the next movie will be the dad going after, trying to find Spike, running into this group that we see at the end, and maybe they'll listen to the Bee Gees together. I don't know. They'll have some disco times. I don't. That whole thing was really really weird. I thought it was a joke, but so yeah. Overall, like I said, I think it's a good movie. The third act is kind of really really off. It didn't seem like it fit at all. Everything changed in that third act. Not only just everything just was completely different, and obviously the mom dies, and I get it's a sad thing, and they do try to set that up to make that an impactful moment, but it didn't really it didn't really get me as much as I was hoping it would, or as much as maybe they were hoping it would. So but yeah, like I said, overall I'm happy with it. It's hard when you have such a weird scene at the end, when that's your last that's the last that's the last impression you have on a film, is when the last 5 minutes are completely off the wall. It's hard to walk away and not have that as a lasting memory in your head when you think back on it. So it's a good movie. I wish they would have done things differently in the third act. But like I said, I have faith in Garland and Boyle. I'm hoping that they figure this out and all this makes sense eventually, but we'll see. So again, thank you for listening. I appreciate all of you who decided to listen, and hope you enjoyed the movie. If you did enjoy it, send me, or if you did have thoughts on it, send a link. You can send a message to me directly with the link in the description, and I'll also have a blog post up. I'll have a link in the description of this episode for that blog post. And if you want to read what I just said instead of hearing me, but the blog post is completely spoiler free. So we will talk to everyone very soon, and hope everyone has a fantastic rest of your day.